The night a single whisper could shatter everything. Los Angeles, September 1984, Sunset Studio, Stage B. I should have known something was wrong the moment the studio lights flickered. Most people would have blamed the aging circuits of Sunset Studio or the late night electricity surge that often pulsed through those Hollywood buildings like a restless heartbeat, but not me. I'd spent my whole life watching my younger brother move between light and darkness, brilliance and silence. Thunderous applause and those rare, eerie moments when he withdrew into himself. And that night, at 26, with the world demanding more of him than any human could reasonably give, Michael's silence felt louder than any malfunctioning light. The corridor outside Stage B was unusually still. Soundproofing kept the world outside from intruding, but that night it felt more like a barrier, like something was being held in, not kept out. When I pushed the door open, the hinges gave a slow metallic groan, echoing through the cavernous dark. There he was. Michael stood alone beneath a narrow cone of white light, the rest of the stage swallowed by shadows. He wasn't rehearsing, he wasn't humming, he wasn't even moving, just staring at the empty rows of folding chairs arranged for the small private run-through we were supposed to have. He didn't turn when I approached. He didn't need to. I could sense the tension radiating off him, not loud, not explosive, but tight, contained, almost fragile, like a violin string stretched just shy of snapping. I stopped a few feet behind him. "You came early," I said, keeping my voice low, cautious. Even in the dim stillness, I felt like sound might split the air. "And I couldn't sleep," he whispered. There was something about the way he said it, not exhausted, not annoyed, just empty, as if rest had become a luxury he couldn't afford. The studio clock ticked overhead, a tiny rhythmic click that felt magnified by the stillness. Michael's shoulders rose and fell with a slow breath, but the motion looked forced, deliberate, like he had to remind himself to do it. "What, you okay?" I finally asked, a simple question, too simple for the complexity swimming behind his eyes. When he turned to look at me, his gaze flickered like the lights had, not unfocused, but searching for something he wasn't sure existed. He nodded, but the movement was too careful, too controlled. Michael never wasted energy forcing, expressions around me, unless he needed to hide something. It's just a rehearsal," I reminded him gently. He gave a soft laugh, barely a breath. "It's never just a rehearsal." His voice was steady, but a faint tremor traveled through his fingers as he adjusted the cuff of his jacket. Michael's hands were usually the most expressive part of him, fluid, precise, alive. Tonight they looked restrained. The hair on the back of my neck rose. Something was wrong, but it wasn't the dramatic, explosive kind of wrong. It was the quiet kind, the kind that ate away at someone from the inside, the kind no spotlight could reveal, the kind that left no traces except the subtle dimming of a person's spark. He walked toward the edge of the stage, steps soft, almost ghost-like, the soles of his shoes whispering over polished wood. I followed silently, watching the tension in his shoulders, the stiffness in his eye, in his knees, his posture. The transformation was so subtle, most people wouldn't notice, but I wasn't most people. I was his brother. He paused at the front row of chairs and lowered himself into one, elbows resting on his knees, fingers laced tightly. His breathing deepened, not frantic, but controlled in a way that carried effort, as if holding himself together required concentration. A single spotlight above us buzzed faintly as the shadows around him stretched and warped across the floor like dark water. I sat beside him. He didn't move. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, not peaceful, charged like the air before a storm. Finally, Michael murmured, "Sometimes it feels like everything is closing in, like I'm being watched even when no one's here." His confession was quiet, almost accidental, like a thought that slipped free before he could catch it. My pulse steadied, instinctive alarm rising in my chest. Watched by who? He shook his head. Not a person. Expectations. The word hung between us, softer than the studio hum, but heavier than the room's entire sound system. Michael lifted his gaze and I saw it, a flicker of something raw, vulnerability blurring with a pressure so intense it felt physical. He wasn't unraveling loudly, he was unraveling silently, inwardly, the kind of unraveling only someone who loved him enough would see. For the first time at that he looked straight into my eyes. Jermaine, and what if one day I walk on stage when I'm not enough? The question stabbed deeper than the quietest whisper ever should. The world knew Michael Jackson, the icon, the superstar, the dancer who defied gravity and the singer who made time stand still. But here, in the dim light of an empty studio, he was just Michael, a young man burdened by brilliance, haunted by perfection, crushed by expectations he never asked for. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Not yet, not tonight. Maybe not until the moment when everything finally threatened to fall apart, and when the line that would save the night would come. But then that moment was still ahead of us, and the night had only begun. The corridor felt colder than it should have. I didn't realize how long I'd sat there with Michael in that dim halo of light until my legs began to stiffen. The studio was quiet, too quiet. Even the air conditioners seemed to hush themselves, as if the entire building understood that a delicate balance was at stake. One wrong move, one wrong word, and everything could collapse. And Michael, he wasn't getting better. He stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping a low groan against the floor. His movements were swift but hollow, like he was operating on instinct rather than intention. I watched him walk toward the far end of the stage, disappearing behind a curtain of shadows where the light couldn't reach. Something pulled at me, like not fear, not yet, but a tight, uneasy thread spinning deep in my chest. I followed. Behind the curtain, stage B felt like a different world. The overhead lights were off, leaving the mirrors along the wall to reflect only faint traces of his silhouette. Michael stood in the center, arms loosely at his sides, chin tilted downward. It looked like a rehearsal person, but his stillness betrayed him. Michael was never this still. Mike? My voice cracked the air like a stone dropped into dark water. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted one hand, slowly, almost ritualistically, and traced his fingers across the cool glass of the mirror. The reflection that stared back at him wasn't the superstar the world expected. It was a fragile outline, barely held together, distorted by dim light and exhaustion. I felt the criminal tension of the moment coil around us, slow and serpentine. It wasn't danger in the traditional sense. It was internal, a silent tightening around Michael's spirit, the kind that left no marks but could break a person all the same. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. They come to watch perfection, Jermaine, not a person, not a brother, not a son, a shape in their heads. His fingertip dragged lower on the mirror, tracing a crack I hadn't noticed before, a thin fracture slicing diagonally like a wound. And he stopped at the edge of it, then barely above a whisper, "What happens when I can't be what they imagined?" And the crack in the mirror suddenly felt symbolic, too symbolic. I stepped closer. "You don't have to be anything but yourself." I meant it. He knew I meant it, but that didn't make it enough. The shadows around us seemed to thicken, stretching across the room when he turned away from the mirror. His breathing had changed. Shallow, uneven, like each inhale fought against an invisible weight. Silent pressure, silent expectations, silent unraveling. I reached toward him instinctively, but he took a step back, palms lifted slightly as if warding something off. Not me, but the turmoil inside him. "Please," he murmured, eyes glistening under the faint floods above us. "Just give me a second." But giving him a second felt like watching someone walk too close to the edge of a building. Yeah, you want to respect their space, yet every nerve in your body screams to intervene. I forced myself to stay put, Michael turned away again, pacing in short, restless lines. His movements sharpened, shoulders tight, steps clipped. He wasn't panicking, he was containing something that was far worse. Mike, talk to me. I tried to keep my voice steady, grounding. He stopped abruptly. And when he spun back toward me, and the look in his eyes sucked all the oxygen from the room. I can hear them, Jermaine. It wasn't literal. I knew that. Michael wasn't claiming voices or visions. He meant the weight of expectation, the echo of scrutiny, the pressure the world placed on him, even when he stood in a room completely alone. But hearing him say it like that, it hit me harder than I expected. He pressed a hand to his chest, right here, like a pulse that isn't mine. The air around us tightened, thickened, turned almost suffocating. I took a slow breath, careful not to let the tension in my gut show on my face. Then let me carry part of it. I said, you don't have to hold everything alone. And something flickered in his expression, and not relief, but hesitation, a dangerous kind of hesitation. The kind that suggested he didn't believe anyone could carry what he felt. His jaw clenched slightly. Jermaine, if I walk out there tonight and I'm not what they expect, I cut him off gently, then they'll see the truth, and the truth has never once failed you. Silence. A long, breathless silence. Then, in a movement so subtle it might have been imagined, Michael's shoulders trembled, barely. A single fractured ripple of emotion across a perfectly composed exterior. I stepped closer, one careful, deliberate step, and he didn't move But before I could speak again, the studio door at the far end creaked open. A sliver of warm hallway light spilled in, slicing across the floor like a blade and pulling both our heads toward the sound. A stage hand peeked in. We're ready whenever you are. The timing was cruel. Michael didn't answer him. His gaze flicked back to me, deep, vulnerable, and unbearably human. The night wasn't over. The unraveling hadn't peaked. And I knew I felt we were only inches from the moment everything would snap. The moment I would have to say the line that would save the night, but that was still ahead of us. The door shut again, sealing us back inside the half-lit chamber of stage B. The echo of the latch sliding into place sounded final, like the click of a lock in a suspense film just before everything spirals. Michael didn't move right away. He stood there, breath low, his silhouette carved by the thin slice of hallway light still fading from under the door. I recognized that kind of stillness, the dangerous quiet before a wave breaks. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, it was internal, invisible to most except me. I approached carefully, the way you might approach someone standing too close to the edge of a high-rise. Mike? He blinked once slowly, as if surfacing from somewhere deep beneath the studio floor. I need air, he whispered. He didn't wait for my reply. He simply turned and walked. Not fast, not frantic, but with a strange, deliberate urgency that made my pulse hitch. I followed him out the side door, into a narrow backstage passage lined with metal rigs and coiled cables that created long, unsettling shadows. The air here was cooler, but no less heavy. Michael inhaled sharply, pressing a hand against the wall to steady himself. His breathing wasn't irregular, just too controlled, the kind of control that signals someone is holding themselves together by delicate threads. For a moment he kept his eyes shut, lifting his face toward the ceiling as if the dim bulbs above might offer answers. I stepped closer. Talk to me. He let out softy exhale, almost a tremor. Jermaine, I can't tell if I'm tired or if something inside me is slipping. The word slipping hit with the weight of a dropped stone. He opened his eyes again, and the look in them, it chilled me. Not fear, not sadness, but a kind of suspended awareness, as if he'd stepped into a room inside himself and wasn't sure how to get out. You're not slipping, I said quickly. You're overwhelmed. Anyone would be. Not anyone, he countered gently, not with the world waiting on the other side of that room. His voice cracked in the faintest way. You wouldn't have noticed it unless you knew him, but I did. Michael looked away, hands curling slightly at his sides. His posture had shifted, not collapsing, but closing in, tightening like he was bracing for impact that hadn't arrived yet. A chill threaded down my spine. Every studio has its own noises, creaks, hums, faraway thumps of equipment shifting. But right then, every sound seemed sharpened, amplified. A cable somewhere let out a metallic ping, and Michael flinched, barely, but enough. He turned to me suddenly. What if tonight is the night I can't hold it? His voice was low, immediate, painfully exposed. What if everything they built around me just falls apart? The passage seemed to constrict. My heartbeat thudded against my ribs. You think I haven't seen you hold the impossible before? I said softly. You carry weight no one can see, but you're still here, still standing. His lips parted like he wanted to respond, but no words came. And then something shifted, not in him, but in the air. A faint vibration trembled through the floor, maybe from a speaker booting up or a lighting rig coming online. Harmless, normal. But Michael reacted as if the ground itself had jolted. He took a sharp step back, colliding lightly with a stack of folded set panels. The panels shivered, threatening to topple. I lunged instinctively, bracing one hand against the stack and one on his shoulder to steady him. For a split second, his eyes widened, startled, vulnerable, almost cornered. Then he froze. We stayed like that, his breath shallow, my hand firm on his shoulder. As the panel settled and the faint vibration faded, when he finally spoke, his voice was a thin thread. Jermaine, I don't feel like myself. The confession sliced through me, raw, unmasked. There's a terror in seeing someone you love, in someone the world thinks is untouchable, and caught in a battle you can't see. I loosened my grip slowly, careful not to make him feel trapped, but I didn't step away. You don't have to feel like yourself right now, I murmured. You just have to stay with me, right here. His throat bobbed with a difficult swallow. Then, in a sudden knock on the metal door behind us, sharp, unexpected, too loud for the fragile air we were breathing, Michael jolted. A reflexive, instinctive recoil, and I felt something inside him fracture a little more. The tension in the hallway snapped taut, a voice muffled through the door. 5 minutes until we're set to roll. 5 minutes. 5 minutes for the world to watch him. 5 minutes for him to gather himself or fall apart. I turned toward Michael. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at the door like it was an adversary. His jaw tightened. A shiver ran through his fingers. His silence thickened to something that felt dangerously close to breaking. I stepped in front of him, blocking the door from view. Look at me. Slowly, painfully, slowly, he did. And in that moment, I saw it. The unraveling wasn't happening later. It wasn't waiting for another scene. It was happening now, right here in the narrow passage where the world couldn't see him. Only I could. The moment the night would tip into something irreversible was seconds away. And the line that would save him, the line I hadn't spoken yet, was cornering me too, waiting to be born, but not yet, not here, not until everything reached its breaking point and we were getting closer. The knock on the door echoed long after the stagehand's footsteps faded. It ricocheted inside Michael more than inside the room. I could see it, like the way his shoulders stiffened, the way his breath clipped short at the end of each inhale as if he was swallowing something sharp. I kept myself between him and the door until his gaze stopped trembling, but he wouldn't look at the door. He wouldn't look at the mirrors behind us. He wouldn't look anywhere that suggested the world was waiting. "Come with me," he whispered. Not a request, not a command, something in between, the quiet plea of someone walking a tightrope and needing one steady hand to keep them from falling. I nodded once. He turned and headed toward the old service stairwell behind the rigging room place, only crew, maintenance, and people who'd grown up performing in studios knew existed. It was dim, claustrophobic, and cluttered with decades of forgotten props, but it was empty, private, hidden from everyone. A sanctuary or a trap, depending on what you brought into it. Michael pushed the heavy metal door open and slipped inside. I followed, letting it close behind us with a muted thud. Dust motes drifted through the light of a single flickering bulb, and giving the entire stairwell an abandoned, almost forbidden feel. He stopped halfway down the first flight, leaning both hands on the rail as if grounding himself. His breath fogged faintly in the cold air, and I stayed one step above him, close enough to catch him if he swayed, far enough to give him space. "And tell me what's happening," I said quietly. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he brushed a hand through his hair, fingers trembling in that restrained, silent way that terrified me more than any outward panic could. "When I was a kid," he murmured, and said, "the stage felt like home, a place where nothing bad could reach me." His voice wasn't nostalgic, it was haunted. He lifted his eyes, and the stairwell's weak light carved sharp shadows across his face. "But now it feels like a witness." I frowned. "A witness to what?" "To everything I'm trying not to feel." The words dropped between us like loose screws hitting metal, tiny, but unmistakably dangerous. He took a step down. I moved with him, the stairs groaning under our combined weight. "I hear them even now," he continued, "their expectations, their excitement, their judgment, all on the other side of that door. And He stopped, abruptly, grip tightening so hard his knuckles whitened. "I don't know if I can walk out there tonight without part of me breaking." The chill in the stairwell deepened, or maybe it was just me. I lowered my voice. "You don't need to be perfect. Not tonight." Michael laughed. A short, breathless sound that carried no joy. "I don't think I ever had a choice." He turned away from me, one hand covering his mouth, shoulders curling in. It was the smallest gesture, something no one in the audience would ever see. But I recognized it instantly. He was trying not to let the pressure escape as something messy, something uncontrolled, trying to contain himself the way he contained every sharp emotion life threw at him. A soft thump echoed above us, maybe someone dropping a piece of equipment, and Michael flinched so hard he hit the stair rail. I grabbed his arm before he could stumble. For a moment, his entire body froze in my grip, rigid, strained, overwhelmed. "Mike," I said, steady but urgent, look at me." Slowly, as if dragging himself out of deep water, he raised his chin. There it was, the truth. Not dramatic, not loud, but raw, a kind of internal trembling that looked like the shadow of a shadow, visible only if you were close enough to feel the temperature change. He exhaled shakily. "I feel trapped," he whispered, "like no matter where I stand, I'm cornered, like the world is shrinking and I'm the only one who notices." My chest tightened. This wasn't stage fright. This wasn't fatigue. This was a breaking point, quietly stalking him step by step. "You're not cornered," I said, "and not as long as I'm here." His eyes softened, and not relief, not quite trust, but something in this fragile thread anchoring him back to the moment. He sighed and leaned against the railing again. "What if walking out there tonight is the moment everything inside me cracks open?" he asked softly. "What if I can't hide it anymore?" I stepped down to stand beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "Then," I murmured, we'll face it together, but you're not going to crack. You're human, Mike, not a machine." He gave a faint twitch of a smile, thin, weary, but real enough to remind me of the boy who once laughed too loudly backstage during rehearsals. But the moment was brief. A faint buzz rattled the stairwell light. a low electric tremor, and again Michael stiffened, eyes flicking upward as if expecting the ceiling itself to collapse. I realized then how close we were, how close he was. The climax of the night wasn't out there on the stage. It was here in this stairwell, this breathing tomb of shadows and dust, where every second stretched taut between holding on and letting go. I reached out, gently gripping his shoulder. "Michael," I said softly, firmly, you're not alone." His breath faltered. The bulb above us flickered again, once, twice, then steadied. So did he, just barely. But barely was enough, and for now we didn't know it yet, but the moment that would define the entire night, and the moment when I'd speak the line that would save everything, was drawing closer like a slow-moving storm, and the silence around us was starting to feel like thunder. We stood in that stairwell long enough for the cold to seep into my bones, not the kind of cold that comes from air conditioning or cracked windows. This was the emotional kind, the kind that settles quickly and deep-more under your skin when you realize someone you love is unraveling in slow motion. Michael straightened slowly, as though forcing each vertebra into place by sheer will. He smoothed his jacket, adjusted his collar. Neat, tiny gestures they knees deep neat they clendy da. It outside as in neat and interpreted as quirks, but I knew them for what they were. A man building armor piece by piece. "Let's go back," he murmured, but the tone, it wasn't determination, it was resignation disguised as courage. I opened the stairwell door cautiously. The hallway outside was empty again, too empty, the kind of emptiness that amplifies footsteps, thoughts, and anything hiding beneath the surface. Michael walked ahead of me, movements neat and precise, but wrong, too quiet, too internal. He was walking while listening to something I couldn't hear. When we stepped back into stage B, the contrast hit us like a slap. Lights warming up, boards humming, equipment shifting, muffled voices passing outside the doors. The world of performance reassembling itself, unaware that the person expected to shine at its center was barely holding on to his own reflection. Michael's eyes darted briefly across the room, and a flicker of something like dizziness, or the fragmented overwhelm of returning to a space that felt hostile only minutes earlier. I watched him swallow hard. The familiar floor, the mic stand, the folding chairs in rows, all were back to being silent witnesses to the pressure crushing him. "Jermaine," he whispered suddenly. I stepped closer. "Yeah?" He didn't speak right away. His gaze drifted to the far wall, where a faint line of shadow cut between two stage lights. His expression tightened, like he just noticed something threatening no one else could see. I followed his eyes, but there was nothing, just a routine shadow where equipment overlapped. But to Michael, that shadow clearly felt different. Do you ever feel, die began softly, like the room is watching you? The chill that ran through me wasn't from the air this time. He said it with such sincerity, such fragile honesty, that for a moment even I turned my head, half expecting to catch something lurking behind the lights. "No," I answered carefully, "but I can feel when it's watching you." A faint tremor passed through his shoulders. He turned away again, not hiding, just drifting. He stepped toward the stage's edge, placing his hand on the mic stand. His fingers curled around the metal, and for a moment I thought he'd use it to steady himself, but instead he gripped it like he was testing whether the world still existed through touch. His breath hitched, and the metal stand quivered under the strain of his grip. "Mike," I said gently, "wow, slow down, you're clenching." "I'm trying to feel something," he whispered. That sentence nearly stopped my heart. "Shh." Not dramatic, not panicked, just profoundly honest. The kind of honesty that only comes when someone is slipping internally and can't find the edges to hold on to. He released the mic suddenly, as if it burned him. The stand rocked once, twice, and then steadied. Michael didn't. He stepped back, a small stagger he immediately tried to disguise, but I saw it. His lungs pulled in a sharp breath, his shoulders rising too quickly. I moved closer instinctively. He lifted a hand slightly, stopping me. I don't want them to see me like this, he murmured, and not even the crew, especially not the crew. You don't have to go out yet, I said. I have to. Not firm, not brave, just trapped. He looked down at his hands, the same hands the world adored, and turned them over as if expecting them to crack like glass. For the first time in my life, then he whispered, I don't trust myself. A faint buzzing crackled through the speakers as someone tested a channel, harmless, mundane, nothing out of the ordinary. But Michael jerked at the sound, shoulders snapping tight, his eyes flicked toward the ceiling, searching for the source. This wasn't fear of failure. This wasn't nerves. This was pressure metastasizing into something sharp and electric, and we were seconds from losing control of it. He exhaled shakily. I can feel the night closing in. I placed a hand lightly on his arm. He didn't pull away, but he also didn't lean into it. He stood suspended between collapse and composure, between expectation and exhaustion, between the world he gave everything to and the private turmoil eating at him from within. Jermaine, he swallowed. I don't know how much more I can hold. The studio lights brightened slightly in a cue from the backstage crew. Michael flinched again, his entire body taut. I knew then we were nearing the breaking point, the moment he'd either push through or shatter silently. The air around us shifted, heavy, expectant. He took one step forward toward the stage center, then another, then stopped cold. His breath froze, his shoulders locked, his eyes widened with sudden, paralyzing realization. He whispered without turning to me, Jermaine. It's happening, the unraveling, the moment he feared, the silent collapse he'd been holding back. I stepped toward him, pulse hammering, readying myself to finally say the words, the line, the one thing capable of pulling him back from the edge. But not yet, because before I could speak, something else happened, something sharp, unexpected, and irreversible, and the night tipped.